Okay, so I'm going to start off our next lecture with the history of life. Because got to talk about life, going to talk about life because it is biology. And always important to know where you've been before you know where you're going. I don't know if you've ever heard that from any of your history teachers. I know I have. So kind of dabbling in the history of life before we move on into the meat of our unit on evolution and classification. So, in case you haven't heard of this theory before, the leading theory in terms of how the universe was created is the Big Bang Theory, where about 15 billion years ago, you had this like one point in the universe, and from that point, you had expansion. From that expansion, eventually you had stars, planets, solar systems, galaxies, etc., etc. In terms of the Earth developed about 4.6 billion years ago. And actually, there's a theory that's behind how the Earth and the different planets were created, and it's called the Nebular Theory, where the planets actually formed through this process called accretion, which is basically the clumping of particles due to gravity. So you basically clumping particles together, eventually you have planets. And once we had Earth, the first organisms appeared on Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. So ideally, you did that 10 to the 8th years in 24 hours before you started watching this lecture to kind of give you, to kind of see what you know in terms of, okay, the geological time scale before I actually give you some information about the history of life. But ultimately, one of the important things to note is that the Earth, especially the atmosphere back then when the Earth was first created, much different than what it is now. There is a lot of different chemicals in the air. Like, it wasn't oxygen. That's why a lot of your early life forms were chemosynthetic, meaning that they were able to use certain chemicals to provide their nutrients, to provide their energy. Remember autotrophs, heterotrophs, autotrophs, photosynthetic, or chemosynthetic. And then your next lecture will be evidence of past life.